What if I told you that our most basic ideas about reality are just plain wrong? Today, we're diving deep into the incredible work of physicist David Bohm. He had this revolutionary idea that our universe isn't a collection of separate things at all, but something more like a single, giant, flowing hologram. But first, let's start with a question. You ever get that feeling when you look around that the world just feels broken? Like it's shattered into a million competing, conflicting pieces? It's a feeling a lot of us have, and it can be pretty overwhelming. Well, according to David Bohm, this feeling isn't just in our heads. He argued it's the direct result of a really deep-seated illusion, one that literally shapes how we see everything. He called it living in a world of pieces. And you see this fragmentation everywhere, right? Nation against nation, religion against religion, us versus them. But it goes deeper than that. It's also inside us, the way we separate our minds from our bodies or our thoughts from our feelings. We start to experience the world and ourselves as if we're just made up of all these separate, disconnected parts. So, where did this idea even come from? Bohm traced it way back to what's called the mechanistic worldview, which was really kicked off by thinkers like René Descartes. You know the idea. The universe is like a giant clock, a machine made of tiny, fundamental building blocks. And look, that view gave us a lot of great science, but it's starting to show some serious cracks. So, all right, if the universe isn't a machine, then what is it? And that question brings us to Bohm's radical, incredible alternative, the idea of the hidden whole. And this is a totally different way of seeing things. On one side, you have that old mechanistic view. The world is made of separate parts, and their relationships are external, kind of like billiard balls knocking into each other. But in Bohm's wholeness view, reality is this single, undivided, flowing movement. Everything is internally related. That means the whole comes first, and the parts we think we see are just temporary shapes that emerge out of that flow. This is the phrase he used for it, and it's perfect. Undivided wholeness in flowing motion. The universe isn't a collection of static things at all. It's one single, unbroken process. Everything is in motion all the time. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This sounds super abstract, right? So how does it actually work? Well, to make it a little more concrete, Bohm came up with some truly brilliant analogies to help us picture this unfolding universe of his. So he said we should think about reality as having two layers, or orders. First, there's the explicate order. That's easy. It's the world we see, the world we touch and measure. It's the unfolded world of separate things. But underneath all that is the implicate order. This is the deeper, enfolded reality where everything is fundamentally interconnected in that undivided whole. To really get this, picture this cool experiment. You put a single drop of ink into a jar of thick, clear glycerin. That ink drop is in the explicate order. You can see it clearly. Now, you slowly turn a crank that stirs the glycerin. The ink drop stretches out into a long thread, and then it just disappears. It's become enfolded into the implicate order. It's still there. Its pattern is distributed throughout the whole system, but it's hidden. But here's the magic. If you turn the crank the other way, the invisible thread gathers itself back together, and poof, the ink drop reappears. It's unfolded back into the explicate order. And that's the big insight right there. The separate things we see all around us, a tree, a person, a star, are just like that ink drop. They are constantly unfolding out of this deeper, implicate reality and then unfolding back into it. And this brings us to his most famous, most mind-bending analogy, the hologram. You know how a hologram works, right? The really wild thing is, if you take a holographic plate and smash it into pieces, each tiny little piece still contains the information for the entire image. The whole is literally enfolded in every single part. Bohm suggested that maybe, just maybe, the universe itself is structured just like that. So what do you call this fundamental process, this engine of reality? Bohm gave it a name, the holo movement. It's the whole shebang, the total, undivided, flowing movement that is constantly unfolding the explicate order from the implicate and enfolding it back in again. It's the ground of all existence. Okay, so that's the grand cosmic theory. But here's where it gets really personal. How does all of this connect to you and me, right here, right now? Well, this is where we explore how, in Bohm's view, thought itself forges reality. See, Bohm argued that our thinking isn't just a passive camera that records the world. No way. It's an active force. It leads us, as he puts it, to not just see, but to experience the world as if it were fragmented. We don't just think we're separate, we actually feel it in our bones. And this leads to a pretty stunning, maybe even uncomfortable conclusion. We completely miss the fact that we ourselves are creating the fragmentation. Our own thinking process chops the world up into little pieces, and then we turn around and act like those pieces were there all along, completely independent of us. Now, to really get this, we have to understand what Bohm meant by thought. He wasn't just talking about what goes on in your head. For him, thought is a whole system, a single, unbroken process that connects our intellect, our emotions, our physical body sensations, our memories, even our whole culture. It's all one field. And this system, he said, has a fundamental glitch. He called it the systemic fault. And here it is. Thought creates a division, a fragment, and then it hides its own participation in doing that. It presents the problem to you as if it were just an external fact, a reality out there that it had nothing to do with creating. So, if our own way of thinking is at the root of the problem, if it's creating this mess, is there a way out? Well, this brings us to the final, and maybe most hopeful part of this whole idea, a new way to see. The logic is actually pretty straightforward. If the problem of fragmentation is being generated by a system of thought that's running automatically, without our awareness, then the solution isn't to go out and try to fix all the broken pieces. The solution is to become aware of the system itself as it's happening. Bohm had this amazing term for this skill. He called it proprioception of thought. Now, proprioception is your body's ability to sense itself. You know where your hand is right now without having to look at it, right? That's proprioception. Bohm asked, what if the mind could do the same thing? What if thought could learn to sense its own movement, to feel itself in action as it's happening? And developing that kind of awareness, wow, it's a total game changer. It completely shatters that deep down illusion that our thoughts are just a passive mirror of what's going on. Instead, you start to see thought for what it really is, a powerful, active force that is constantly participating in shaping the reality you experience moment to moment. And so that's the question that this whole exploration leaves us with. Bohm's work doesn't hand us any easy answers, but it points to this incredibly profound possibility. Can we learn to make that subtle but powerful shift from being completely lost inside our thoughts to simply being the awareness that sees them? Can we learn to see our thoughts instead of only seeing the world from them? Because that shift, Bohm suggested, just might change everything.